Hi, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Dameon Priestly. I'm a contemporary fine artist. My work looks at social injustice and cultural movements born of social upheaval. In this launch program of my series, I'll be looking back just over 20 years to a collection I created examining the issue of missing persons in the USA. Set against the backdrop of 1970s America, the research I carried out at the time disturbed me so much I felt compelled to get it down on canvas. A strange thought perhaps, but I truly believe that not all art, in inverted commas art I say, should necessarily be purely decorative. I believe that work could and should really ask the viewer to fully engage with it. Ultimately, as in the words of the Mycelis brothers, the more you put in, the more you get back. It's ultimately more rewarding in the long run. My work occasionally asks the viewer to consider issues that they were unaware of, or they'd rather not think about, or contemplate at all. In essence, there's a place for purely decorative art, but if you're looking for it here, you may leave disappointed. So in 2002, I started my introduction on the Missing Series 1, by stating that murder is terrifyingly easy in America. I suggested, based on investigators' experience, that you could kill a stranger, dispose of their body, and be 2,000 miles away before the person is even missed. A horrifying thought, but reality. And with an estimated 25 serial killers at large, that figure hasn't, by the way, really changed in the last 20 years. And an average of 4,400 unsolved murders a year. That figure is down from 5,000 in 2002. I guess down to technological advances, DNA, etc., etc., etc. But I just find the whole thing staggering and in need of investigation, looking at through the eyes of an artist. Not to, not take it seriously. How could you discuss something like that through art? But like I say, art down the generations and down the centuries has dealt with all sorts of things, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be doing it today. So for the sake of my narrative, I invented a serial killer. The middle-aged man would be single, educated, relatively affluent, retired, white male. He'd be charismatic, manipulative, intelligent, and obsessive about routine. This is the characters that I put into this person, and I had to create it as if he was real to really figure out how to tell the story best. So I've seen this fictitious perpetrator driving from state to state through small towns, backwoods, and trailer parks. He would lure his prey into his car with the promise of something better, an escape, an opportunity perhaps. In reality, it would be none of these things. In the paintings, a series of 6 originally, the man is never seen. He remains elusive to the viewer and to the missing. He's a constant presence though, and that omnipresence without being able to put a picture on it makes it all the more, real and horrible. Rather, I opted to show the victims' final resting places: a disused gas station, a trailer, a pickup truck, and an empty freight train carriage. These iconic symbols and places and things within Americana are, of course, a very conscious decision by our killer. He chooses these places as a point of derision almost. He sees himself as above the American dream, regardless of whether that's a reality or not. He sees himself as way beyond that, separate from the accepted narrative. The girls are painted in the pieces and are backgrounded by earthy colours, reflecting the soil or the natural elements in their final moments. The colour of clay, colour of moss, and the colour of bark on a tree. There are quotes also on the paintings from Walt Whitman, well-known, famous American poet. Our perpetrator is drawn to his words. Yeah, he too, like Whitman, for all very, very different reasons, of course, is in denial about who he is. Again, like I said, for very different reasons, but that ambiguity and inner conflict in his writing is something which resonates deeply within him. With all of this, bearing in mind, there's a trend in modern documentaries on serial killers to be focused almost solely on the perpetrator rather than the unfortunate victims and their loved ones left behind. For every obsessed true crime fan, whatever that is, they'll know the names: Gein, Bundy, Berkowitz, Ramirez, and the rest. But few will remember the names of the missing or lost, and I wouldn't presume to list any of them now. That would be the wrong thing to do. But my point still stands that focus on the killers rather than what's important is something which upsets me. This, along with the approach by law enforcement in those years, the 70s and early 80s, combine the problem. They compound it. Back then, most of the missing person cases, especially if they were teenagers, were passed off as runaways, typical behaviour of kids at the time, especially if it was in their background, unstable families, etc., etc., etc. Ridiculous, really, but this was all taken into consideration and was subject to question and affected the investigation and how it unfolded. Reports would go in a pile, and then when they reached the bottom of that pile, they would be filed. Take from that what you will. The word filed there has many definitions, and certainly some reports that I've read, that filing could be in the bin. With little or no communication between agencies or sharing of information between states or even jurisdictions, combined with no real effective database, I know it's before computers, but the paper database just wasn't there. Psychopaths could behave with relative impunity. If they decided to do something, there was enough of them around that they could do what they wanted. In some cases for decades. The sliding scale of how seriously a case was taken and handled was based on very, very questionable criteria, as I've said: family background, wealth, education, colour, age, and even how the missing person looked, which heavily depend on how the case was treated. And what would decide if you were a drug addict or were still a sex worker of any kind. This collection was titled Missing, not Killer. Missing, for a very good reason. My aim was to refocus our attention on the ones that matter, the only ones that matter. The examination of this proved so massive for me, I would return to it in my next series, Missing Series 2. I will look at this in my next show, and in some cases, if a body was discovered at a state line, it would be moved so that it would be in another jurisdiction and consequently someone else's problem. With this in mind, this alone obliged me to further look into the missing. Thank you for your time today, and I appreciate it. See you next time.